2013. And our final speaker, Bradley Womack, Professor of Foreign Affairs and holder of the CKEN Chair at the Miller Center. He is author of many books, including China and Vietnam, The Politics of Asymmetry. Today's event is co-sponsored by the East Asia Center, UVA Global Affairs, and the Miller Center. Now, let me turn to Vice Provost Mo, who is also Ambassador Mo, who will in turn introduce our another ambassador, our guest tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Dorothy, and a warm good morning and good evening wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so privileged to have Ambassador Ngoc with us tonight here in Charlottesville, virtually, thanks to Zoom, as part of what's turned into quite a bit of attention to Vietnam that we've had here at UVA for the past few weeks. Ambassador Ngoc, we had your, until very recent counterpart, Ambassador Daniel Crittenbrink, the U.S. ambassador to Hanoi, with us. And it was such an exciting evening and such an interesting discussion. It awakened a lot of interest across our university community into the story that Vietnam has had over the past many decades and the increasingly important role it's playing certainly in ASEAN and Southeast Asia, but more broadly as an increasingly important security partner for the United States. For our audience, we are really so privileged to have such a distinguished diplomat with us tonight as Ambassador Ha Kim Ngoc. He is the 6th ambassador of Vietnam, of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, to the United States since we began diplomatic relations. And he has been a diplomat, I think, for longer than many in our audience have been alive, since 1988. He was appointed to serve in Washington by President Tran Dai Quang in March of 2018. And before that, he served as the Deputy Foreign Minister in charge of Vietnam's relations with countries in the Western Hemisphere. Ambassador Ngoc graduated from the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam in 1985. He studied Russian at Kyiv University, Ukraine from 1986 to 1987. And he also has a master's degree in international relations from the Diplomatic Academy in Vietnam, which he earned in 2010. Ambassador Ngoc, we are so happy to have you with us tonight. I remember from experience how long the day can be when you work as an ambassador. So we're especially appreciative that you've so kindly agreed to meet with us at the end of what I'm sure has been a very long day. We're very eager to hear your thoughts on the relationship between Vietnam and the United States. And I gratefully turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Stephen Moore, for your kind and generous introduction. Ambassador Stephen Moore, Vice Provost for Global Affairs, Professor Bradley Womack, CKEN Chair at the Miller Center, Professor Dorothy Wong, Director for East Asia, Professor Hung Pham, Physics Department, distinguished professors and students of University of Virginia. It's a privilege for me to join you virtually tonight. I can't think of a better place to talk about Vietnam and Vietnam-US relations than the University of Virginia, or UVA in short. Throughout its decorated history, the UVA has groomed many great statesmen and diplomats with strong engagement with Vietnam. Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd US president and the father of UVA, had been trying then to obtain rice seed from Vietnam to grow in his home state of Virginia. And current US ambassador to Vietnam, Dan Crittenbrink, is one of champions of Vietnam-US friendship and partnership, to name just a few. This evening, I will briefly touch upon Vietnam's place in the world and the burgeoning relations between our two countries. After that, I will join the discussion with you and take some questions from the audience. I hope I won't keep you stay up late tonight. First, Vietnam's place in the world. As you know, Vietnam is situated at the heart of the Indo-Asia Pacific region, which embraces three largest economies, namely the United States, China, and Japan. Our eastern coast of 3,260 kilometers flanks the East Sea or the South China Sea. This strategically important body of water is the transit point for 1/3 of global commodity trade, about 5.3 trillion US dollars, of which 1.2 trillion directly destined to and from the United States. In other words, peace, security, and stability in the South China Sea matter remarkably for the national interest of the United States. Over 4 decades after the end of the war, Vietnam has changed considerably to become a land of opportunities, with the average GDP growth of 6% per year from 2010 to 2020. A vibrant and emerging economy with a market of 100 million consumers, our expanding middle class is projected to double from 44 million now to 95 million in 2030. Vietnam has become a link of 15 important FTAs, including next generation FTA like CPTPP or mega FTA like RCEP. In total, these FTAs engage our economy with 60 major and dynamic economies in the world. Despite the COVID-19, Vietnam registered an economic growth of 2.9% in 2020, making us among the top performing economies in the pandemic. According to the IMF, in 2020, Vietnam's economy surpassed Singapore and Malaysia in GDP size, making us the fourth largest economy in Southeast Asia. Therefore, Vietnam represents a great opportunity for foreign investors and businesses, especially from the United States. On containing COVID-19, to date, Vietnam has registered only 1,603 infections and only 35 deaths. We have been able to manage the third wave of COVID-19 in our country. In addition to imported vaccines, we are also making significant progress in developing our homemade vaccine, which may be available from September this year, hopefully. Our embassy here has already talked with colleagues from National Security Council and DFC about the possibility of vaccine cooperation between the United States and ASEAN and Vietnam, especially in technology transfer and licensing for vaccine production in Vietnam. Second, regarding our foreign policy, if we use just one single word to characterize its nature, it is independence. This dates back from the thousands of years of Vietnam's history and embodies our strong national identity. Let me give you a panorama of our external relations. To date, Vietnam has established diplomatic relations with almost all UN member states. We have become strategic and comprehensive partners of 30 countries, including all the major powers and all the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Councils. On the regional and global stage, Vietnam has become a reliable partner and a responsible member of the international community. As an increasingly influential player in ASEAN, we have risen above the challenge of COVID-19 and stiff major power strategic competition to conclude a very successful ASEAN chairmanship in 2020. We are an active, non-permanent member of the UNSC for the 2020-2021 term and serving now the President of the United Nations Security Council for April. Vietnamese peacekeepers have been active in UN PKO missions in South Sudan and the Central African Republic. Our men and women in UN Blue Berets have not only contributed to maintaining international peace and security, but also won the hearts and minds of the local people. Vietnam has done a good job in many other multilateral fora and organizations, including WTO, APEC. We are the host of a number of international and regional summits or conferences, especially US DPRK Second Summit in 2019, World Economic Forum on ASEAN in 2018, APEC Leaders Week in 2006 and 2017. Third, our strategic vision of the Indo-Asia Pacific and the world. Given the power shift and structural changes in the world, the Indo-Asia Pacific will be the center of world politics in the 21st century. At the heart of this complex geostrategic landscape, ASEAN and Vietnam will definitely have to navigate our way through immense challenges. We all know that one of the most formidable challenges facing us is how to manage the relations with China and the United States. Many doomsayers have predicted that the future of Asia resembles that of Europe on the eve of the World War I. I don't believe in this self-fulfilling prophecy. Vietnam is very clear-eyed about the dynamics at play in our region, but we are also confident that we are all destined for a better future if we all closely adhere to the following. First, all countries, be they big or small, abide by international laws and universally recognized rules and norms. From the territorial dispute in the East Sea or South China Sea to the looming water crisis in the Mekong sub-region, international laws, including UNCLOS 1982 and other relevant UN conventions and multilateral agreements, must be binding with no exception. Speaking here last month, Ambassador Brink, a close friend of mine, made a very insightful observation, and I quote, "The United States and Vietnam both want to live in a stable, prosperous region where countries obey and follow international law, where large countries do not bully the weak, where countries trade freely and openly," unquote. I can't agree more. Nowhere does this truth resonate better than in the South China Sea. Therefore, I hope that the United States will continue to stand with your allies and partners to uphold fundamental principles which underpin the maritime rule-based order in the South China Sea. Those are peaceful settlement of disputes in accordance with international laws, including UNCLOS 1982, no use of force, freedom of navigation and overflight, respect for territorial integrity and legitimate rights of littoral states, including the right to develop offshore oil and gas within our EEZs. Second, the major powers act in a responsible, transparent, and constructive manner. While strategic competition among the major powers is an objective inevitability, this should not lead to confrontation and conflicts. Neither do countries in our region, including Vietnam, wish to take sides. The history of our region has shown that all designs for regional hegemony or divide and rule are doomed to fail. Small and medium countries like ASEAN and Vietnam welcome economic cooperation, not coercion, and political and diplomatic collaboration, not domination. And third, we strongly welcome and encourage the United States' comprehensive engagement in the Indo-Asia Pacific. The United States is a resident Pacific power. Like most countries in our region, Vietnam believes that the United States' constructive and sustainable engagement in our region is indispensable for peace, security, cooperation, and prosperity in the Indo-Asia Pacific region and beyond. I hope that the economic pillar of the US Indo-Pacific strategy will be further strengthened, making your presence in our region more comprehensive. I understand the domestic challenges for the United States on big FTAs, but we in ASEAN and the region want you to return to the TPP or CPTPP now, sooner rather than later. Fourth, ASEAN centrality in the evolving regional architecture should continue to be respected. As a community of 650 million people with a combined GDP of 3.2 trillion US dollars, ASEAN is expected to become the fourth largest economy in the world by 2030. Therefore, ASEAN is a force to be reckoned with in the strategic equation in the Indo-Asia Pacific. Vietnam always strongly supports and promotes the ASEAN-US strategic partnership. A strong and united ASEAN having good relations with the United States is in our shared strategic interest and vital for maintaining the strategic balance in the region. Fourth, Vietnam-US Comprehensive Partnership. Much has been said about how our two countries have moved from a bitter past to comprehensive partnership today. Our cooperation ranged from promoting trade and investment to defending the maritime rule-based order in the Indo-Asia Pacific and beyond. There is hardly any strategically important area that Vietnam and the United States cannot work with each other. You may be well aware that according to the 2021 survey by the Singapore-based Institute of Southeast Asia Studies, 84% of Vietnamese people trust the United States. This is among the highest rates in our region. From the perspective of people-to-people ties, it demonstrates how far our two nations have gone to build mutual trust. Vietnam and the United States have common interest over regional security and stability. Besides that, our two countries' prosperity is closely linked with each other. Economic ties serve as the foundation of our bilateral relations. Despite the COVID-19, in 2020, our bilateral trade turnover reaching 90.8 billion US dollars. The United States is our biggest export market and second largest trading partner. Vietnam is the 10th largest trading partner of the United States. Over the past 5 years, the United States export to Vietnam witnessed a 175% growth, creating hundreds of thousands more jobs here. Last year, despite the COVID-19, Vietnam and the United States had many significant steps to celebrate the 25th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. The exchange of high-level delegations and a host of events in 2020 showed that we rose above any challenge and adversity to keep the momentum of our partnership. And just nearly 3 months into the new administration, we are encouraged that Vietnam is identified by Biden administration as a priority partner in ASEAN, as indicated in the interim guidance for national security strategy. Secretary of State Blinken and other high-ranking officials have also had very fruitful and productive calls with their Vietnamese counterparts. Since I have been posted as ambassador here, in all my conversations with American colleagues and friends, I hear a consistent message of a close and stronger relationship. On COVID-19, Vietnam and the United States have worked closely with each other, both bilaterally and multilaterally, especially through the ASEAN-led mechanism. During the hardest days of the pandemic, Vietnam extended a helping hand to our American friends, offering face masks, personal protective equipment, among others. The United States also offered us generous assistance in containing the virus and facilitating the economic recovery. On the security and defense dimensions, Vietnam and the United States have worked so closely on a range of issues, both in bilateral cooperation and in multilateral and regional institutions. Cooperation to address world legacy issues has been one of our most effective joint efforts to pave the way for our new relationship. Yesterday, I attended an event hosted by US Department of Defense in the remembrance of 16 Vietnamese and American officials and servicemen who lost their lives during an MIA accounting mission 20 years ago in Quang Binh province of Vietnam. And we are continuing their work today. We thank the US administration for the continued support in training and transferring equipment, thus helping enhance capacity of Vietnam's maritime security and maritime law enforcement in order to defend our territories. We have enjoyed effective cooperation in exercise, information exchange, in search and rescue, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief. On climate change, which is among the top priorities of the new administration in the United States, at the invitation of President Biden, our new president will attend the Climate Change Virtual Summit in 2 weeks. But what has impressed me most is the unimaginable growth of people-to-people ties between Vietnam and the United States. By the end of 2019, over 800,000 American tourists visited Vietnam. Over 32,000 Vietnamese students are studying in American universities. Many of our successful young men and women have graduated from this UVA, and I believe that alumni from UVA or the Vietnam Fulbright universities and the like will be ambassadors, bridging our two nations and contributing to our deepening relations. In a final note, I would like to express my optimism about Vietnam's prospect and great confidence of our two countries' shared future. It is said that we cannot change the past. What we can change is the future. If history is any indicator, whenever Vietnam and the United States have good relations, we stand a better chance to enjoy peace and prosperity in the Indo-Asia Pacific. The unimaginable steps forward that we have made over the past 25 years show us that Vietnam-US relations will reach new heights in the years to come. But we should not take things for granted. A quarter century ago, it took a lot of courage, determination, and efforts for our two countries to heal the wounds of war and move forward. Today, it takes equally strong and strategic vision and endeavors from both sides to put our relations on a firmer and more sustainable foundation. One of the key factors for our achievements is the mutual understanding, mutual trust, and mutual respect for each other's independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political system. It is my conviction that with our strong support and great efforts, we will achieve greater success. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that our next engagement will be on-site, not online.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Ngoc. I couldn't agree with you more. I'd very much like to shake your hand to thank you for that fascinating overview of the story of Vietnam and the story of our relations over the past few years, which have been in such a positive direction. You mentioned at the beginning of your remarks, our founder, Thomas Jefferson's interest in getting seeds from Vietnam, something that's not known to a lot of Americans even today is that the father of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, was a student of Thomas Jefferson, and I think shocked the world when he declared Vietnam's independence on September 2nd, 1945, in a square full of hundreds of thousands of people in downtown Hanoi. When he stood up to the microphone, the first words he said were, "All men are created equal. They are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Certainly among the most famous quotes of Thomas Jefferson. So I think there's a real link through Thomas Jefferson and Ho Chi Minh that brings UVA and Vietnam together to have something in common. For myself, listening, I don't know if you'll agree with me, Ambassador Ngoc, but when you work in diplomacy, sometimes it's hard to not be depressed all the time because you're constantly facing problems. People don't understand what you want to do. There are conflicts, there are wars. There's never enough money to do what you want to do. But listening to your remarks reminded me that diplomacy is also a profession in which there can be great hope and great optimism. And I think the story of the relationship between the United States and Vietnam, certainly, as you alluded to, one of the most difficult, troubled histories between any two countries in the world, and how far we have both come in getting beyond that history and building a future. I remember when I was a child, my first awareness of international relations in the 1960s was the US involvement in the war in Vietnam. It was on the news every night, in the newspaper every day. Every community had soldiers who died or were wounded in the war. And of course, over the years, there was growing American opposition in the streets to the war, and finally the U.S. Withdrew. And so many years later, when I was working in government, I was in 2007. I was working as Assistant Secretary of State in the State Department for Political Military Affairs. And we decided to work together with your government to start regular political military consultations on our various mutual security interests. And so I was very nervous before. I'd never been to Vietnam in my life. I had all of these memories of all of the heartbreak and sorrow and war, and so many of the terrible things that happened in the war. So I was a little nervous about going. And I'll tell you, I've never been more warmly received anywhere in my diplomatic career. And my very first meeting was with your minister at the time for public security. And so I prepared my speech ahead of time, that I felt uncomfortable, that I was very sorry about how things had been in the past. And Mr. Ambassador, I got about 30 seconds into my remarks, and he cut me off. He said, "Stop, I want you to stop. We don't have time to talk about that. This is what I want to talk about." And he pulled out a map of the South China Sea, and he rolled it out on the conference table. He says, "This is what we need to talk about. We have security interests in common, and we know that we disagree on some things, but we want to work with you on those issues that we agree on." And it was such an amazing experience, and all of the rest of my meetings there were just equally remarkable. And so the story of the relationship between our countries just shows what can be possible when we put the pain. We can't forget the pain of the past. We should never forget the pain, but we can't let it stop us, in your very eloquent words, from moving forward to build a better future so that our people don't have that kind of pain again. So the story of the relationship that you work on between our two countries is a source of hope and promise about what diplomacy and hard work can achieve. And I share your optimism, regardless of who is running the government in either of our countries. I think we have so many interests in common that we have already a very firm foundation for moving forward. But Professor Hung, PK, I wonder if I can invite you to share some reflections as a Vietnamese American. You have a very different perspective than I had growing up, never having been to Vietnam.
Yes, in fact, I was born in the north, and my family moved to Saigon in 1954. So basically, I was growing up in Ho Chi Minh City, for most of my teenage life. And then I left Vietnam in 1968 to go to Canada for study. And uh, at that time, I left a few months after the so-called Tet Offensive. Uh, so it was very, very, for a young teenager, that time was very emotional. And as you know, that in Vietnam, we have family members who are in the military, uh, in fact, 90% or so. And so I had a brother who was drafted. Uh, um, and then, of course, he died in the battle. But so if you look at that experience, you might think that, there might be some kind of resentment for why he lost his life, and but I actually, I have to say that by um, going out of Vietnam to Canada, and then in 1969 I went to Chicago, that opened up my mind a lot about what's going on. And then I started to see things in a different light. Okay. I mean, about the various causes of the war, and and um, and so basically, I was at that time, uh, in some sense, I flipped about 180 degrees in my political conviction to basically support the end of the war, you know, and it came in 1975, and my obviously, like with many families in Vietnam, uh, my family left. My mother, my sisters, and so on, and their families left Vietnam. At the end of the war, and so they came to the U.S. here, and so I did my best to support them psychologically, but at the same time, I was not shy in expressing my conviction that it was a good thing that the war has ended. And and so uh, from 75 on, actually, I I was trying to see in which way I could make some kind of contribution to heal the wounds of the war, and in as much as I can do. And it was not until many years later that I had the opportunity to go back to Vietnam to participate in physics conferences, and then in 2006 and starting 2007, I fully actually contributed to helping in little ways, higher education in Vietnam through our physics program from UVA. There uh, transports to Hood University, and I have been back to in Vietnam basically every summer, since then. And so and there are so many places in Vietnam that I have not seen even now, and every time, every year when I saw something, it was just a beautiful revelation to me, the people, the scenery, and uh, the food, of course, and uh, so I basically, I hope that I will be able to continue doing so in the years to come, and in little ways that I could do, and uh, and I think that I um, managed to convince my UVA colleagues here to do the same thing. In fact, they went back. Several of them went to Hue to teach also.
Mhm.
So that
Thank you very much, PQ. And I just want to check in. Brantley Womack, one of America's, certainly the university's foremost experts on the politics and history of Southeast Asia, was having on our panel and was having technical difficulties. Brantley, are you able to hear us and join us for comments? Well, I'm
so Brian
afraid
had
not.
to unmute his. Oh, there. Yes. Okay. Good.
Well, I don't think I've been listening on the telephone so far.
That's it.
I'm very, very touched by both the ambassador's remarks and also by Steve and your remarks, especially PQ.
Yes.
And it's already made this discussion very worthwhile. I'm afraid that just watching how the faces are freezing on my screen and the sound is going on and off, that I better be a silent participant, a silent partner in our further discussion. But I'm really happy to applaud the event of bringing the ambassador to UVA, even on Zoom, and we certainly hope to bring him
In person. Yes.
UVA in person when that is possible. We are as lucky with COVID as Vietnam is now.
Indeed. Well, thanks very much, Brantley. So, Mr. Ambassador, we're going to put you to work, I'm afraid. We have a few questions for you, and I want to invite our audience, if you have a question, to please enter it. Please don't do it anonymously. We want to know who you are. Enter it on the Q&A part of Zoom. And while we're waiting for those, Mr. Ambassador, I wonder if we could come back to you with a question. I'd be very interested to hear what have you found the biggest challenges to be in overcoming the legacy of the war, the U.S. war in Vietnam, and what challenges still remain to overcome?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. But first, let me express my appreciation to your very impressive remarks and also sharing from Professor Pham Hưng. It's very enlightening and really inspiring me, in my job. Now, answering your question, I think the most challenging thing, I believe, is the suspension, the hatred and mistrust caused by the war. In the United States, you call the Vietnam syndrome. Mm-hmm. And in Vietnam, we call America syndrome. So to make it simply, it is the consequences of the war that caused the mistrust between our two nations. And let me share with you, a few years before the normalization in 1995, some Americans still believed that Vietnamese government held the American prisoners, which was not true. But that belief delayed the normalization for several years. And step by step, with our common efforts, determination, and with the tangible result of our cooperation, we have been able to build the trust. And I think that's a very important factor for our future cooperation. And you asked about the current challenge. I think our continued cooperation to resolve the war legacies, it is a very important factor for our mutual trust, mutual understanding. And we have achieved very positive result. On our side, we have been working closely with your side for the MIA fullest possible accounting. And on your side, you have helped Vietnam for remediation of dioxin or Agent Orange. And the Da Nang Airport project was a model of cooperation between our two countries. And we are now working on Bien Hoa Airport, which is larger project. You also help Vietnam to resolve the UXO or unexploded ordnance clearance. Mm-hmm. And many provinces in Vietnam now become clear of mines and bombs. And also you help us, the war victims, including Agent Orange victims. And recently, the US Congress provided some money for accounting Vietnamese soldiers. So this is a very, very tangible result. And I think it helped us, help the reconciliation between our two nations and serve as a very strong foundation for future cooperation.
Thank you. Brentley, I know you have a question. You need to unmute. Oh, perhaps we've lost him again. There you go.
I will try. I know that China is a major concern of Vietnam and has always been for thousands of years. And in the United States, we're more aware of the tensions between China and Vietnam. But besides the South China Sea, which gets most of the attention here, what are the major challenges in the Vietnam-China relationship?
Thank you for your question. This is a very good question. As you know, China, as well as the United States, these two countries are our leading partners, and I can say most important partners of Vietnam. We have been able to build a good, stable, mutual beneficial relationship with both China and the United States. Of course, as you said, there are some outstanding issues with China. You mentioned the East Sea or South China Sea dispute. We also have some other outstanding issues. For example, the management of the trans-border water resources, especially in the Mekong sub-region. Yeah, you know the situation over there. We are the lowest country in the Mekong region, and the Mekong Delta recently has been very negatively affected, by the lack of water because of hydropower plants upstream. So we are working with China and other upstream countries so that we can have a sustainable and effective use of the transboundary water resources. Another issue is the imbalance of trade between China and Vietnam. And we have worked with our Chinese counterparts so that we can export more goods to China to improve the bilateral trade. But in general, I think even though we are facing those challenges, we have been able to build a constructive, stable, and mutual beneficial relationship with China.
Thank you, Ambassador. PQ, I know you have some questions too. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, so my question is more, it's not about politics, it's more on the cooperation between Vietnam and the US. And, my wish is basically to see a better cooperation in terms of scientific exchange and higher education. And we already had a program in Hue since 2007, and so and I know that in Vietnam, many universities have been collaborating with a number of countries like France, Japan, and so on. So, beside the Vietnam Fulbright University, which specialize in liberal arts subject, I was just wondering whether we could increase our cooperation in terms of scientific exchange in higher education, uh, just like the University of Science and Technology in Hanoi, that came from the cooperation between Vietnam and France. Okay, and I don't know what our administration is could be thinking, but I would say that we are ready if there's any need for expanding our present collaboration.
Thank you, Professor Hưng. But first, let me express my appreciation to your efforts to the common endeavor to end the war in Vietnam, and also to contribute to the reconciliation process. And second, thank you for your efforts to bring your colleagues to Vietnam to enhance the cooperation in education and training. You mentioned the two areas, scientific and education cooperation. Both are top priorities of Vietnam now. We need the advanced technology, we need the high quality human resources for our modernization. So we thank you for the program of cooperation with Huế University, and we are ready to connect you with the Hanoi Scientific and Technology University for further cooperation.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ambassador, we have one of the questions from our audience, actually from an alumna of UVA, Zheran Li, who's now a student up close to you at SAIS at Johns Hopkins there in Washington. And the question is, the new Biden administration places human rights as a top priority. What is Vietnam's view on this question?
We understand that this is one of the pillars of U.S. foreign policies. And I think over the past 25 years, Vietnam is the only country in Southeast Asia who has the yearly dialogue with the United States. Mm-hmm. And so far, we have held 24 dialogues. So almost every year, we have the dialogue on human rights and democracy. Of course, this is the area we have different views because of the background, of the history, of the culture, of the political systems. But we maintain the dialogue, we listen to each other's concerns, we exchange views in order to increase the mutual understanding and narrow the differences. And we, through these dialogues, we don't let this issue to become an obstacle for our further cooperation. So we will continue to work in that direction, and we are ready to have the constructive dialogue with the new administration on this issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Another question from someone in our audience, and perhaps the person is recalling the important role Vietnam played in hosting one of the historic summits between President Trump and the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. And our audience member wants to know, this is Chumwanya Obi, how has Vietnam managed to engage the US and China in its own way? Is there a role for Vietnam in managing the US-China relationship?
This is very interesting but difficult question. As I mentioned in my previous answer, both China and the United States are two leading partners of Vietnam, and I can say two of the most important partners. And we want to have good relationship with both, and we don't want to take side. ASEAN and Vietnam, we all want to have good cooperation with the United States and China, and we see the opportunities when we have good relationship with both. Of course, we cannot deny the competition between those two powers, but we encourage them to stay away, to refrain from confrontation and conflicts, and to solve all the differences or disputes through peaceful dialogue and negotiations. And we use ASEAN as the platform for China and US and other major powers to talk with each other, to solve the differences. So that's the way Vietnam and ASEAN deal with the major powers, especially with China and the United States.
Thank you. Thank you. I wonder if I could ask a question. In your opening remarks, you talked about the explosive growth in people-to-people contacts between the United States and Vietnam. And you know, not to embarrass PQ, but PQ is one of millions of people of Vietnamese descent, of Vietnamese heritage, who we're so lucky to have such a vibrant, talented and accomplished community here in the United States. Many of them, as you know, arrived here as refugees Many of them were opponents of the North Vietnamese government. And so I'm wondering now, all these years later, what is your job as ambassador like, or your embassy? What sort of what could you talk a little bit about how you and your embassy interact with the Vietnamese community living here in the United States?
Thank you. This is a very good question. You know, we are witnessing very dramatic change of the Vietnamese community in the United States. And I think Ambassador Hưng can have some comments on this. I witnessed with my own eyes because I was in San Francisco almost 25 years ago. And I also witnessed how the community, Vietnamese community, evolved in this process. We are seeing the deep integration of the Vietnamese community in the United States into the economic and political system of America. And they have been playing an increasingly more important role in your system. Number two, the second and the third generation of the Vietnamese here, they want to go back to Vietnam as a tourist or visit their homeland, their family members, and to do business. So I think we see a great opportunity for reconciliation, and especially for working together between the Vietnamese community here and the Vietnam as a country. Our government and people see them as an integral part of the nation. For our embassy, even during the pandemic and before that, we have had many meetings with the communities, either on the West Coast, on the East Coast. I went to California, Texas, Washington, Oregon, different places, and here in Maryland, Virginia, and other places, so that we can directly listen to their comments, their suggestions, their problems. And during the COVID-19, we had keep contact, very close contact, direct contact with them. We issued many warnings so that our community here can take appropriate measures to protect themselves. We provide assistance, and we also help them if they want to go to Vietnam to visit their country or for medical treatment, something like that. So I think that there are some very positive changes, and I'm very optimistic about the contribution of the Vietnamese community here for the United States and for our bilateral relations.
Well, thank you very much. Ambassador, I see we're just about out of time. Brantley, I thought I'd give you one more chance. Do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make before we thank the ambassador or PQ?
Well, let me follow your question with another people question, which is coming from the audience. Stephen Campbell of the Central American Institute of Business Administration. He wants to know, when and under what requirements do you anticipate Vietnam opening to foreign travel?
Thank you for your question. It depends. Yeah, it depends on how and when we can manage and control the pandemic, especially with the vaccination. In the United States, I think you see a very bright picture of vaccination. So we do hope that the transaction between the United States and Vietnam can be resumed very soon. And our Prime Minister already instructed relevant agencies to work out a gradual opening plan. And I think the aviation, the airlines agency is planning to reconnect the international flight from September this year. So I do hope that we soon can have tourists from the United States, businessmen to Vietnam, and our people from Vietnam can visit the United States by the third quarter this year.
I hope you're right. I want to go back to
Mm.
Vietnam.
I-
PQ, how about you? Any closing thoughts from you?
Yes, two closing thoughts. The first one is I completely agree with Ambassador Ngoc that the younger generation of Vietnamese living in the U.S. has a completely different view of the U.S. Vietnam relation, and many of them want to go back. I mean, at least to visit Vietnam for to do something, And in fact, I did bring a couple of them to Hue to teach English, for example, to the students. So they do not have the heavy luggage of history of their parents. That's one thing. And the second thing about traveling, uh, because just to be really on the safe side, I would not go this year, for this summer. So I am planning to organize a physics conference in Quy Nhơn next summer, 2022.
I see.
So, even for our friends here, even if you are not, going to that physics conference, you are welcome to show up there in Quy Nhơn.
Well,
And thank you.
I'm afraid I failed physics in high school, so I won't be much help at the conference. But I'd love to go to be your assistant in organizing.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, and I would like to thank Ambassador Ngoc too. It was really eye opening for me. This 1 hour. I mean, I learned a lot.
Ambassador Ngoc, we can't thank you enough. You've been so gracious with your time at the end of a long day. Such interesting, positive, and an optimistic message about the future. We wish you every success in your important mission here. We really hope to get you here on
Yeah.
grounds here in Charlottesville as soon as it's safe to do so we can thank you in person and treat you to a meal and maybe some good Vietnamese beer and continue our conversation. Any closing remarks from you?
Right.
It sounds great, and I want to thank Ambassador Moore. You are an excellent moderator, and I want to thank Professor Hưng, Professor Wong, Professor Womack for this conversation. It's really helpful to me as well, and I do hope to have a chance to invite all our distinguished professors to Vietnam House to enjoy Vietnamese food.
Oh, yum!
Yes.
It's a deal. It's a deal. We'll be there. And finally,
It's a
warm
really
thanks.
nice place.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then finally, warm thanks to our audience for tuning in. We didn't get to everyone's questions, but I have a feeling we'll have more opportunities to engage with our friend from Vietnam, the ambassador, before long. Again, so thank you all very much. A good evening and a great spring weekend beyond. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, have a nice
Thank you,
weekend.
Ambassador.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cảm ơn anh
Chào
Hưng.
anh nhé.